everyone in this room has water at the top of mind pretty much all the time. At the legislature, that's not really the case. Important water issues don't necessarily make the cut in what gets talked about in terms of key priorities and focus during a session. This last session, though, really did end up being more of a water session, and I'm delighted that we have three gentlemen, three statesmen who have a passion and a dedication for water joining us today. To my right, I got it right without looking at my hands this time, Senator Charles Perry from Lubbock, representing Senate District 28. He has the largest Senate district in the state, second largest, okay. 42 counties? 41, okay. Makes it easier to travel around, down from 51. He's been serving since 2014. Prior to that, he was in the House of Representatives from 2010 until his election to the Senate. As we all know, he has been the chair for the last number of sessions of the Senate Water, Ag, and Rural Affairs Committee, and serves on a very long list of other committees on the Senate side. Also sits on the Sunset Commission, SWIFT Advisory Commission. On his right, Representative Tracy King of Uvalde, representing District 80, a longtime public servant. He's been in the House since 1995. Over his tenure, he has served on various committees. He's the current chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee. And as Comptroller Hager just mentioned, and many of you know, he has announced that he will not be seeking re-election after 28 years of service. His departure, while very well earned, is definitely going to leave a void, both in the legislature and in the water community. We are losing a champion of water, so, but we're so happy to have you here today. And then on his right, Senator Pete Flores of Pleasanton, Senate District 24. He served in the Senate from 2018 to 2021, and then came back again in 2023 with a district that was shaped a little bit differently, few different counties, which gives you a great perspective on a number of regions of the state. Before joining the Senate, Senator Flores had a long career in public service as a Texas game warden. He served 27 years, reaching the rank of colonel. His district stretches from south of San Antonio, west out into the hill country, and north of Austin into portions of Bell and Williamson counties. So thank you all for joining us here today. Thinking about retirements, in addition to the retirement that you announced, Chairman King, Representative Ford Price has announced a retirement just this morning. We got notice that Representative Thompson is not seeking re-election as well, and we're seeing a turnover in the House in terms of leadership and that institutional knowledge. Something we saw this last session was the formation of the House Water Caucus, an endeavor that you really spearheaded there. That's a bipartisan, non-voting caucus, and I think you maybe ended up with 73 members at the end of the day. Could you share a little bit more about that effort, its effectiveness, where you see it going, especially in light of this changeover that we're seeing?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So we are real proud of the Texas Water Caucus, Legislative Water Caucus, and so it was something that had been discussed for a while, and I just thought that this might be a good time to start it, because we knew that we were going to have a big water session. We knew that we were going to need some help getting this amendment passed in November. And so I thought it would be an opportunity for people to buy into the process. I reluctantly agreed to chair it the first time, just to get it kicked off. Ironically, I was hoping Ford would take it over next session. But you never know how things are going to work out. So, but I'm real proud of the progress they've made. Sarah Schlesinger has done a good job of coordinating. When we started it, I told her, I said, I'm not a party planner, I'm not a meeting planner, I'm not even very creative, and not a deep thinker. And so she said that she could provide all of those skills, and so I told her just to knock herself out and get it done. So we've got it done. I think they've got some public relations programs that are going to gear up in anticipation of Prop 6 in November. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad we were able to get that done.
Yeah, and I think last session, it was an opportunity for education of a lot of members as well as their staff on various water issues, and I think Sarah hopes to continue that going forward, which will become all the more important when we see new members coming in who don't have the same knowledge on water. So, Chairman Perry, I want to ask you, you've been a strong voice on water in the Senate the entire time you've been there, one of the few who is consistently focused on those water issues. What are your thoughts on cultivating that knowledge and that understanding of these issues on the Senate side and really getting others to understand the importance?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Water supply. I've been water supply since the day I got the chairmanship. I was water supply before I had the chairmanship, and I'll continue to be water supply. So this session was a rare opportunity, as Comptroller Hager mentioned, about surplus funding, that we would try to do something significant in the area of development of new water supply. I was kind of shocked about the lack of understanding of what that really means. To me, new water supply is supply that's not currently being used in the water supply system. Pretty clear. If it's not currently in a cycle and you find a source of new supply to interject, that would qualify. Specifically, acquisition from states around us that have indicated to sell us water that we have not taken advantage of, or marine desal, produced water desal, and brackish desal. Those are currently resources that are not currently being used in the cycle, so therefore they would qualify as new supply. So the legislature stepped up, put $1 billion into that fund, and in that fund it is broken out into two areas. Twixt Water Development Board will get the lion's share of it initially. The new water supply bucket, if you will, is $250 million. You get to vote on this come up in November. I say all that to say is we had a huge surplus, and it goes to your question. We are lacking an understanding of water in this state at a significant level, and the future of water supply has never been a topic because, first of all, your taps come on, and it's at the highest level of the state offices. I don't hear people complaining about water because the tap came on. Well, the drought, as it always does, and over time with these 1,200 bodies hitting the state of Texas, is beginning to highlight the fact that maybe, just maybe, we don't have an adequate water supply that meets needs going forward. So it requires your groups, people that are politically connected inside of your groups and outside of your groups, to start having real conversations with elected officials about the fact that, yes, today the tap runs, but that's no guarantee that it'll be there tomorrow if we do not plan accordingly. And I think that we finally got a little bit of that foothold, if you will, in the legislature this session, that maybe, just maybe, of all the Texas miracle that we like to talk about, we haven't addressed a water issue that can be addressed. I tell everybody I'm a clanging cymbal when it comes to water supply, and I am because I know that we can solve that problem. But today our water supply needs are met because one place has it and the other place needs it, and they move it, and they call that water supply. That's just robbing Peter to pay Paul. So we have to develop new resources. And I think this session with Senate Bill 28 and SJR 75, that it's going to at least establish a presence for every session to have a conversation. So we have to get the education at the right level, and we have to get the voters. We have to get voters talking to officials about water and why it's important to move on water before the day it's not there. And I think that's the biggest challenge I face.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk more about that. Before we do, though, and turn into that investment in water, I'd love to hear from you, Senator Flores.
Before I turn loose, I have not gotten to talk to my retiring colleague. And if the water bill is the reason he's retiring, I would not have filed it. I'm not shocked. We had some conversation, and you never said it clearly, but you could tell you're tired. And sometimes this job wears you out. But we're losing a good one. You're one of the good guys on a lot of different levels. And you and I are afflicted with the same problem. We have the face for radio. But your voice and the way you can articulate with that draw is going to be severely missed. But the legislature does have a lot of turnover in the House specifically. Water's not sexy, it's expensive, it's politically non-issue because it takes a long time to address water issues, and nobody wants to tell somebody their fees are going to go up to pay for future water supplies. So it's at a deficit as far as initiative taking, and when you lose folks that get that, it's a rebuild from day one. So you've left a legacy on some level, but we're going to miss you for a lot of reasons as a friend. But we're losing a good guy there. So anyway, I wanted to get that out there for sure.
Thank you for that. Before we move on and talk a bit more about that Senate Bill 28 and the new water fund, I would like to ask you, Senator Flores, having been relatively new to the Senate, if you could talk a little bit about your experience coming in and needing to learn about these water issues. How has your experience been? Have you felt that, are they accessible, and what more can we be doing to help new members understand the importance of these issues?
Well, thank you, and thank you all for allowing me to come and visit. It's good to be back here in San Antonio and our part of the world. And Charles, we have great food around here, and you'll enjoy it. First of all, I want to say that these gentlemen to my left have been longtime friends and mentors to me, both in my capacity when I was the colonel game warden, having to work the halls and relationships. These gentlemen were there for rural Texas and for landowners and for water rights for decades. And so, and I'm very honored that they're first and foremost my friends. And but the experience that we have in Senator Perry, the subject matter expertise in water is invaluable. And I have it's a great honor and privilege to be able to serve with him on his committee, Ag, Rural Affairs, and Water, and to enjoying him in legislation that is generational in its impact. I'm very honored that Tracy King is my state rep in Atascosa County, and when we got Tracy, I was extremely pleased. And we're saddened that he's moving on, but I don't think you're gonna. We'll still be, we'll still be seeing Tracy King and the impact. And I had to be able to work on legislation with Chairman King. We did the Evergreen together for Atascosa County. The relationships that we have in working together as members of the House and the Senate. Working for our constituents to get these things done, bills passed, monies allocated. It's teamwork and relationships, and these gentlemen here are some of the best in the state on doing that. And so, in preparation for this, again, you want to be able to get appointed to these committees in the first place. So having these relationships with leadership in the Senate, the Lieutenant Governor appoints us to committees. And my experience, as a game warden, those of you who dealt with a game warden, we know what the importance of water. And in Parks and Wildlife, for decades, it's been the top issue is water, the second issue is water, and the third issue is water. Because without water, there's no wildlife, there's no resources. But conversely, without water, our entire economy, our civilization collapses. So the minute that folks can't turn on the spigot and water doesn't come on, it becomes a top issue. And in my district, which is primarily rural, water is a top issue, especially now in times of drought. You have Medina Lake over there at 3% capacity right now. Wells on properties out in the ranches and in subdivisions the tables have dropped, and you may have a multi-million-dollar house sitting on top of one of those hills, but you can't get water to it. It's not very nice to live in, and it becomes a top issue. These gentlemen have for years been proponents of water and how important it is to the future of Texas. And and I'm glad that you all have dedicated yourselves to it as well. And working together as a team, we can continue to expound on the work that was in the constitutional amendment and make sure everybody goes out and votes for that constitutional amendment to authorize the money for this. We got $1 billion. We need $10 billion. Would you agree with that, Chairman? We need a $10 billion at minimum. But it's an issue that as long as we keep it alive, we work together to keep the issue alive, into the next session and the next, and we have the funds to do it. We're both on finance, which helps a lot to be on finance committee that does the budget. And we will work together, I assure you, to keep it front and center, because without it, we have no quality of life.
Thank you for that. So talking a little bit more about investing in water, Senator Perry, you authored Senate Bill 28, and you, together with Chairman King, led the charge to get those passed. It really is a critical investment in water infrastructure, as well as new water supply. It also has that public awareness component. Why this past session? What was the moment that made it the time to push this one forward?
Well, I'll share a little insider baseball. First of all, it was only because we had a surplus that we had a small window to plant the seed. I will tell you, up until the last, it's not an understatement, probably the last day before final budget vote, that bill was on life support. I'm saying that not to reflect a lack of support at the right levels, but a lack of understanding. And that goes to my comment a while ago. And I'm going to get on a little bit of a soapbox, but I think it's relevant. We had a surplus this state. $18 billion is dedicated to one initiative. I am all about letting taxpayers get a credit on their property taxes. Everyone in this room will see somewhere on average of $1,000 to $1,400, $1,500, depending on your age, off their property tax bill. That's good stuff. And we should do that when we can. But the reason we do those initiatives is typically we condition our voter base to think in terms of what we want and what they say they need. If I present anywhere in my town halls, and I do a bunch of these in 41 counties, the option of spending $18 billion on property tax relief, or make the point we only have one bucket of $18 billion and we can spend it on water, roads, bridges, grid, communications, 99.99999% of that group is going to pick infrastructure. So somewhere in this communication, we have to start as a elected official and as people in the legislature, but more importantly, people outside the legislature, start talking to us and members and donor groups and contributions to donors to the state. We have to start talking about water and grid and things in a capacity level, because I'm not suggesting to you, I'm not about giving you relief on your property tax bill. I mean, we would all want that. But I think we kind of miss, because the $1 billion, Senator Flores said it, if you start looking at the leaky pipes alone, that's an estimated $390 billion number. If you start looking at what I think the statewide water plan and some of the conversations I'm having, we're talking $20 to $50 billion probably over the next 50 years. The good news is we got a fund, voters are going to approve it overwhelmingly, and that state's water supply fund, the $250 million bucket, I told the Lieutenant Governor I don't think there'll be more than 20 projects out of that fund over the next 50 years, because it's multi-billion, it's multi-hundred thousands of acre feet projects for new supply. That's its intended purpose, is to leverage large water supply projects. The other bucket's going to be a continuation. We're going to do $1 billion every session if I had my way, because we've got to leverage small communities' ability to fix leaky pipes. But that's not new supply. That's taking care of our existing supply. New supply will be large commitments of acre feet production by those that choose to help us with that, and that's what there's water supply. It will not happen until it's too late. You're not going to get support in the legislature to throw $1 billion at a fund to do these initiatives until we're 20 years behind the curve. So I'm just telling you the truth. 2028 is all as good as it is, and excited I am about the fact that it's being there, was on life support up until the day that the session closed. And it shouldn't be that way.
Thank you for that. And Chairman King, as the House sponsor, what were your priorities in that bill? And do you see that setting the stage, as Chairman Perry just mentioned, $1 billion every session, perhaps?
Well, and thank you, Senator Perry, for your leadership and for your candor with your comments there. And you bring up something, and the irony is that the the politically popular issue in terms of people's 30-second attention span is, of course, their property taxes and their appraisals and those types of things. And, one of the big concerns that we heard from leadership quietly was, we don't want to build in something that is unsustainable. In other words, the property tax relief, they have to keep coming up with that money, to fund those schools year after year after year. And the irony is if they had chosen to spend it on infrastructure, yes, you do have to come up with the money sometime down the road. I mean, again, but it's much, much more sustainable, if you understand what I'm saying. And they're not setting themselves up to have to face a big bill somewhere down the road financially. But we deal the hand that we're dealt, and we play the hand that we dealt. I'm sorry, and that's just the way it works in our world. Is sometimes you get caught up in trying to mold policy discussions around political discussions, and our job is to try to get the two together and get people working. So anyway, what was I looking for? Of course, we would love to have gotten a lot more money. So that's why we tell everybody that it's a down payment, and $1 billion is a lot of money. As Comptroller Hager said, it may not be to some of y'all, but it is to Tracy King, and so the marker is laid down there. The value of it is there's a fund going to be set up, and so we can start this discussion item and build on it and try to bring in another $1 billion every single session if we can. But my priority, because of the district that I represent, is of course I was more on the leaky pipe side of the equation and trying to help the communities that I represent fix those infrastructure needs. And the new water supply, of course, was something that was important to Senator Perry, and he brings up an excellent point that if you don't address that, it's not going to happen. And we are just basically moving the cards around on the table when you move groundwater from one area to another, or you take surface water and you move it around the state. That's all good stuff, but it's still the same amount of water that you're dealing with. You haven't increased the supply. So I've always said, your two big supply increases are going to be through conservation measures that we haven't even thought of yet. In my view, somebody who's a whole lot smarter than us is going to come up with that. Some kid, there again, probably 20 years too late, or 20 years later than it should have been. But so you got water conservation measures that we haven't even dreamed of, and you've got your whole desalinization, whether it be brackish water, produced water, or seawater, that are going to be the sources down the road at some point. Both of those things are expensive. In order to get real good conservation, the truth is the water needs to be more expensive than it is now. And there again, I'm not running for re-election, but we all know that. Everybody that works in the world and the water world knows that. And in other countries, we spent 4 or 5 days in Israel. They recognize that back in the 40s or 50s when the country was first formed, and they started on a systematic effort to raise the cost of water all this time in order to prepare for what they knew was going to come at some point. So anyway, my big priority was leaky pipes, and then my second priority was water supply for the reasons that we've talked about.
Thank you for that. And, water supply, one of the reasons why we need to secure that is for the growth that Texas is seeing. We just heard from Comptroller Hager. The growth is a blessing, but it can't continue without water. It really is the not-so-secret ingredient, right? Senator Flores, your district includes a number of counties that are seeing significant growth pressure, whether it's the Hill Country or outside San Antonio or north of Austin. How are your counties and how are your districts faring? And do they have the tools they need to make sure that growth has the water it needs?
Well, thank you. We had this very issue we spoke at a West Texas Legislative Conference a few weeks ago. Let's just take some figures from that reflect the district. Just take Bandera County. Bandera County in the previous 10 years had a growth of about 1.8%. In the last 2 years, it's 6%. Medina County is 7%. Burnett County north of Austin is 7%. So I'll have all these, it's that growth, and you can get from some of these hotels and just look at the growth and the subdivisions occurring in all of my county surrounding the metros, the San Antonio, Austin metro, everywhere, and in the Hill Country, especially it's the Highland Lakes is the primary source, and everywhere else is this drought has been significantly impacting the water tables, but yet we're still having more and more subdivisions coming in at the same time. So but you have to have, got to have good sustainable sources of water, not only for the people but also for the agriculture in there. So conservation measures are being taken very seriously, not something that's just a hint, but being taken very seriously. The repair of infrastructure is very important, as Senator Perry had pointed out. That the loss of water that we have is significant losses because of aging infrastructure, and hopefully we will continue to address that. And looking for the alternate sources of water. I mean, just take San Antonio and wanting to import from Uvalde or from Kinney County folks, there's no saying that says that fortune favors the prepared. And the way I see this bill and others that Chairman King and Chairman Perry have fought for years is that we have taken a step. It's $1 billion, but hopefully but it's an issue that's being heard. And while we got our foot in the door, and hopefully we can work together, all of us, to continue to try to get ahead of something that we're, as Senator Perry pointed out, that we're really far behind on, but we're moving forward. It may be a baby step right now, but this is preparation for the next step in my mind, and I will work diligently with my colleagues to make sure that we continue to press the water issues and infrastructure and availability and the funding for it as much as we can.
Thank you for that. On that note, and talking about subdivisions and growth, Senator Perry, you sponsored legislation this session, Senate Bill 2440, that is going to require municipalities and counties to carry out groundwater availability certifications on those subdivisions. That is going to give potential buyers a lot more information than they currently have now to make some informed choices. Are there other changes that we should be making to better position buyers so that they know what they're doing, or other tools that we should be thinking about giving to municipalities and counties on this front?
Well, I think that was one of those Captain Obvious moments, but we had a division up in my area of the state that literally had 25 homes built on it, and then everybody decided, woke up, we haven't got water to support it. So that's not the way we do business, and that's not the way we should do business. So all that did, it changed the government code to go from a may require certification, and the certification was very much a rubber stamp piece of paper, to no, you got to prove up that there's a decent amount of water there before a subdeveloper puts on it. So that was just one of the Captain Obvious moments. I think that as time goes on and development continues to occur, people are going to start having conversations about real zero-scape landscape stuff, about, do we really want St. Augustine with 3-acre subdivisions and 4 wells to pump on it? Those are going to happen, and I'm a private landowner guy, really a private rights guy, but you fix it by raising the cost of water. But there's got to be some honest conversations about really what is practical use of the limited water supplies we have down the road, and that bill right there, I think, gives a real clarity to development going forward, that if it's outside the city community, if it's out in the county, you don't just get to set up your shop the way you exactly want to without some certainty that there's going to be water underneath it. I'm shocked that the mortgage industry has not got onto this. I'm just shocked that the banking environment isn't looking to that from a development perspective before they would issue 30-year mortgages to someone that's built their life savings up to put their house on there. So I think those are coming. I think is more a conversation. I've been told you got to be quiet. You can't say that publicly. People won't come to Texas. The manufacturers and companies won't move to Texas. And my response to that is, yeah, they will if we're talking about it and we're going to address it. But shame on us if we don't talk about it and they show up and then they don't have what they needed and what they thought they had. Because everybody loses, and then it's too late. So I think, other specific regulations or ordinances at the county or city levels, I think that over time, communities, as we start raising the awareness, and part of that I want to be clear, in that water bill, there's a very, very small piece of money to allocate towards education and getting the word out and conservation from the littles. You get the littles starting to hammer mom and dad for wasting water, there will be an evolution. On the city level, you raise the meter rates. People shut down. They do. That's the quickest way to govern water. And they're going to go up if you're going to stay up with infrastructure and build out water supply. So all of this is kind of in motion and will self-evolve. I don't have any examples of specific ordinances. That one just glared at me because of the community I live in, just saw that play out. Fortunately, there was a pipeline from Lubbock already extended and could be extended to that area with proper compensation, and they worked it out. Had it not been for Cremwa and a line available to that community, there would have been 2,500 homeowners that couldn't pump a well. So those are things that we shouldn't allow happen, and that's what that bill did, but I don't have specifics.
Yeah.
Let me say it this way. I was reading something in a book the other day. The comment or the line that stuck out in the book was, sometimes later becomes never. And if we keep saying we're going to deal with water later, it will become never. And there's got to be a sense of urgency about what we're talking about.
I like that, Captain Obvious. And the example you give is not the only one. I think that there are, anecdotes from around the state of similar situations playing out. So I think that's a great step in the right direction. Another impact of growth, or another way that it's being addressed in some areas, is through large water transfers. You alluded to this in your comments earlier, Chairman Perry, from more rural areas into the urban areas. It was a subject of conversations in both of your committees over the interim. Chairman King, you sponsored House Bill 3059, and you were the Chairman Perry, the Senate sponsor of that, increasing some export fees and clarifying how districts could use those dollars in order to kind of help the local community and those wells if they're impacted. It does highlight those tricky issues between urban and rural, between landowners who want to sell their water and landowners who want to keep it in the ground. Districts are kind of in the thick of it. They're stuck in the middle of a lot of those tensions there. I would just be interested to hear from you. How did we get far enough? Is this one step, and where do we need to go further to help resolve some of those tensions between those areas to make sure that we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul?
You're speaking in regard to the mitigation fee, the mitigation. So before I address that real quickly, I want to say that when we speak of Senator Flores, will appreciate his comments since he's sharing the stage with two guys that are talking about raising the cost of water here. We're not talking about artificially driving up the price of water. We're talking about allowing it to raise on its own organic way in order to accommodate the needs that the local entities need. And that's a real challenge when people come to you and say, hey, look, our water bill just went up $10, and there ought to be a law against that. And so, you have to gracefully talk to them and help them and not get in the way. But and then I want to say that bill that came up about that, the county, your bill about, 24 something, yeah, that actually was one of the funnest things that I worked on in the legislature. I've always said the House Natural Resources Committee is a policy committee and not a politics committee, because we get to look at issues like that, and that was a real issue. It is a real issue, and it has long-term implications, and the builders and the entities that were involved we had some real good, candid discussions behind the scenes and in committee about this. And, you know, I think a lot of people came away from that with the knowledge that okay, this is something that you would think that people that were buying a home would look at that first. You would think that the county commissioners would want to make sure that that was the case so they didn't have to deal with it. But people get lazy, and so this is a real issue. And so I appreciate you bringing that up because it ended up. And I know, you know, you get caught between the property rights argument and the water rights argument and all of that, and we're always trying to thread the needle there to make sure we're not running over anybody. So that was one of the more interesting discussions that we got to have this session. So on, you know, I started that process back during the interim. I asked for the speaker to assign us an interim committee assignment to look at the impact of large export permits because we had a couple of them around the state that have been in place for a while where we could see what the impact was, and obviously the one up there outside of Austin, you know, and that particular area, what do they call that one? Yeah, was the big one. But there's some others that we've looked at, and it just became, in that particular one, they did a fantastic job of using private resources in order to mitigate the damages that came to those wells that were actually in that district, but it didn't address what could be done in the neighboring districts that were equally affected also. And so I thought that was a good opportunity to clarify that you could use export fees for the purpose of mitigation on those wells in case because there is an honest legal argument that maybe that you can't do that because it's private landowner wells. And so if nothing else, it draws attention to that. It's not going to go away. You're going to continue to have large groundwater permits because that's the least expensive source of water to accommodate the growth. And I think it's naive if we just stick our head in the sand and act like it's going to be okay because it will be till it's not. And so I think that we look at it ahead of time and have an honest, candid discussion about what are the ramifications of doing this. And I hope that we can continue having that discussion in the future.
Thank you for that, Senator Flores. Your district includes areas that have been looked toward for large water transfer projects. I'd be curious to get your perspective on that and the use of export projects to meet municipal demands.
Well, thank you. So it has to do, I guess, with you know, looking, well, you use another cliche, but you got to look at both sides of the tortilla, if you will. Each one has their side. If you have the opportunity to do your due diligence and come to a win-win deal with where no one party is being you know, impacted negatively than the other, you know, the types of discussion, open discussion, negotiations are you know, it's what happens, but you know, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes things try to get shoved down folks' throats, but we had that's for hopefully our oversight agencies and others to be able to do their job and do their, you know, make sure that there's due diligence that's done, that both sides are examined. But that the reality of it is that, you know, in a lot of our counties, especially our rural counties, you know, they're experiencing this explosive growth, but yet you wouldn't think that you'd have to file bills that say, well, before you buy something, you want to make sure you have water. There's a lot of times we see bills that you're thinking, what? You know, that's common sense stuff. But you know, sometimes we have this explosive growth. Folks want to come in, build, and leave, and then they don't, you know, and then you're stuck with the problem. So doing as much proper due diligence, looking at both sides, you know, coming up with a win-win deal to balance our water resources that we have, and to work together to find sources that are sustainable for the future growth is what has to be done. It's just. Is, as Comptroller Hager said a little while ago, it's very extremely complex. And then combined with the private property rights, which we're big proponents of private property rights.
Thank you for that. Chairman Perry, I want to give you an opportunity to comment on the water transfers. But one thing I want to add to that is there's been conversations about whether or not, in particular, large municipalities are really doing enough to conserve water before they go out and look for water from another community, whether it's leaky pipes, whether it's additional reuse that they should be doing. You actually had sponsored a bill on that, 1289, or authored a bill 1289 this session on that. You know, should we be having a conversation about if municipalities should be doing more, and then if you just want to comment generally on issues associated with the large transfers as well.
The idea is if you're going to come to the state for leverage, support, some SWIFT, whatever monies, you ought to be being good stewards of what you have first. So the lost data reports that most municipal supplies, it's voluntary. And I think it needs to be mandatory that your water loss data needs to be shown up. And if you're doing a good job, there's going to be a certain percentage you always have. But if you're literally wanting and wastefully by not taking care of your infrastructure, the state shouldn't fund leaky infrastructure. We just funded things to fix leaky infrastructure. So again, it's kind of just the obvious to me. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. At some point in time, I think it becomes a major player in applications for water funding to cities that show good stewardship and are willing to make hard conversations from the governor, from the mayor and the council people with their citizens. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. We shouldn't we shouldn't reward bad behavior with dollars from the state. We make them, if they're good, doing good stewards, then we ought to help them. With that other conversation, I'm telling you, I cannot understate the state of water transfers to areas that are growing beyond their water capacity. We are literally going to wake up and have moved communities, i.e. people, out of the areas that this state miracle, food, fiber, and fuel. Food, fiber, and fuel. That's not being done in the hill country. That's done in West Texas. It's done down in here in this area. So if we literally move the water out of those areas to cities so that we can receive the rewards of financial institution and banking transactions, revenues, our sales tax revenues, we will see this state hit third world Mississippi kind of level pretty short order. As we see this growth, I have said it in here, and I know y'all are tired of hearing me say it, but the more the population centers become more active politically, and water will be that emphasis, they will start pushing for socialization of water. And if you think they're not, you're not paying attention to history, nor are you paying attention to the current ongoing conversations. So as your industry is, I don't know where that leaves you. It really only happens two ways. Either the state government, as that conversation moves forward, and as people like us move out of the legislative process, I promise you the next breed of legislature is going to have a more socialist mindset. Not because they're bad people, but because that's the generation that they are. They see government as an answer to everything. So you as an industry group will either be the operating arm for that socialization of water because you're already in place, or you will move aside and government really will maintain. So the writing's on the wall with the growth that we have if we do not increase supply. The way you handle a private property conversation is if you can get more of it, then you satisfy a lot of problems, right? But when you're taking from a place to give to another, it doesn't end well long term. We are on that slippery slope. I had once thought it would never happen in my lifetime. I'm 61 years old. With the growth that Texas experienced and the blessings we've been given, I can honestly think that in certain areas specifically are already happening. I will see that conversation of water confiscation by state government and federal. New Mexico's water is already being managed by federal, not state. State's involved. So it's coming, it's here, and it only is going to get worse if we don't address the supply aspect.
Thank you for that. So in addition to growth being one of the pressures we're facing, drought is another one when it comes to water supply, and I want to turn the conversation in that direction. The most recent drought monitor shows 96% of the state in some level of drought, over a third of it in extreme or exceptional drought. when you look at the map, we actually had a panel up here yesterday talking drought. It looks a bit like a crime scene. Just spreading outward from central Texas. Chairman King, I'd like to start with you. You've been in the legislature through a couple of droughts. You started during a very dry period. You were there in 2011. You've seen how the public, the legislature, how they react or how they don't react to these warnings. I'm just curious if you've seen a change over time in how the message is getting through and responding to drought when it comes to water.
Well, the message does change and respond until the next big rain event, and then all of a sudden it's it's happy days again, and no, wait a minute, we don't need to spend that money to fix that. We don't need to do this. We don't need to do that. And it rained again. That was a once in a lifetime drought, as Comptroller Hager was saying earlier. And so there has been a change, but it seems like the droughts come more often now. But the time frame, the window that we're looking at is just like that in terms of Earth history, and so we don't know. This might be the wettest times that we're going to see, for all we know, in long-term history, or it might be the driest times. But it's nonetheless, we can only plan for what we got a 50-year water plan, and a lot of us in this room won't see the end of that plan. But so I think that there is an attitude change because there is a sense that there's more drought. Water's gotten a little bit more expensive. There's more people coming in and that type of thing. And we're going to see an increased emphasis on the things like we were talking about, people guaranteeing that there's water available. Senator Perry brought up a good point about the mortgage companies will be looking at this. My daughter's in the process of buying a house, and her closing fees as a buyer are $16,000, and that's just a lot of CYA stuff for the mortgage companies. And so the fact that they're not looking at this particular issue is pretty fascinating. And maybe there's some places in the country where they do. But anyway, the discussions are changing, and I think they're getting more helpful. And I think things like this Senate Bill 28 and SJR 75 will help bring a lot of awareness, and all the discussions that we're going to have in preparation for Prop 6 are going to help also.
Thank you for that. And so Chairman King mentioned the water planning process. Senator Perry, you're part of the Sunset review of the Development Board. And one of the things actually that was in the Development Board Sunset Bill was about some of the feasibility of these large projects, and also allowing regional water planning groups to look beyond the drought of record. Do you see additional changes needed to ensure that our water planning process is appropriately taking into account
Yeah,
droughts?
I think a couple of things. First of all, the drought got real personal the other day. I was at the grocery store thinking about getting a brisket to smoke, and it was a prime cut, so I didn't get it. But there was an actual $172 brisket laying in the freezer that day. That was a large brisket, prime cut. Now, there was a $70 version, and as bad as I cook, nobody's going to know the difference. So I went with the 70. The cattle stuff's just going to get worse, people. They don't have a good inventory. It's going to be your beef price is going up. So if you ever thought about being vegan, you might move on that initiative. Here's the deal with the state water plan, and I want to make sure I'm clear. I'm appreciative of the state water plan. I'm appreciative of all the energy and effort that goes in to make sure on some level we're planning to meet our 50-year need. But that need's based on addressing the last drought of record. So I'm kind of looking more towards, instead of planning to survive, I want to start planning to thrive. And that's where my water supply conversations go. So yes, we have to be involved in the state water planning process at a level that's legitimate, realistic, and can happen and needs to happen. But I want to kind of change the conversation from we've got our drought of record covered if it comes again to how do we meet the needs going forward, and that's the supply conversation that we kind of run from. I don't want to just survive, I want to thrive, and that's where I'm focused on. That said, the state water plan, and everybody has been around me knows, I kind of called BS. It had 29 reservoirs in it when I came into session in 2011 with the drought. And I started talking to people about the reality of whether those are going to happen or not. The truth of the matter is, Senate Bill 1500 and something requires a evaluation of what's in that, specifically to the reservoirs, and determine if they're going to happen. Some of those have been on the books for 30 or 40 years, economic and regulatory and access to right-of-way, because it's now grown up, isn't real. So to the Water Development Board's credit, they did that, and I think some got removed. Because some of the people that were putting those into the plans back in the 70s or 80s aren't even living again, and they were just kind of rubber stamping the plan every 5 years. So we have a more realistic water plan. Even then, we've got 23, I think, reservoirs left. And in private kind of conversation with those communities in that area, I don't think that probably but about 13 or 14 of them may be real. So we got to get real in our water planning. So I'm going to continue to be not a critic, but a hold your feet to the fire in the water plants and make sure what we're planning on doing can actually happen. So those are things that I think are relevant to the water plan. I really do.
Thank you for that. And Senator Flores, I'd like to give you an opportunity to comment on drought and how it's affecting your district and what you would like to see, if anything, change to help better prepare.
Thank you. Well, it's certainly what the drought does and has done, and has made the practice of conserving more realistic, and not only realistic but absolutely necessary in a lot of places. But as Chairman King said, well, they'll do that until the next rain, and then we'll go back to doing what we were doing before, thinking everything's going to be all right, instead of learning from it to make sure that we're going to sustain a good, viable water supply, and to learn from it. Okay, what were the other things besides the lack of rain that were causing us to lose this water? Was it our infrastructure? Was it our practices? Were we being allowed too liberal of use of the water? Is it being distributed equitably? Are all the the stakeholders being taken care of in a sustainable way? So moving forward, especially with the astronomical growth that we're experiencing. It's not, we had the great drought. People forget. I mean, I've read about it, but I've talked to folks that lived then in the 50s. That was 10 years in the 50s. Almost no rain. But could you imagine what that happens now with 10 years with no rain, with 30 million people? And back then it was probably a third of that number. But we have to, again, we have to plan for that, we have to learn from this. So I think a lot of my communities are learning from it, and making adjustments in their local policies to be able to sustain and to plan for the growth that's happening and will happen. But that only can be done, managing very finite resources. For what you have now, and not just for the next rain.
So we are starting to get close to the end of our time today, and I want to give each of you an opportunity to kind of respond to a closing question, and I'll start with you, Senator Flores. Is there a particular groundwater issue that's affecting your district that you would like to focus on over the interim?
I think a lot of that, on the top of my head, I would say I don't have one, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm here to listen to you, and then to listen more than me telling you what I'm going to do, but rather what you think we need to do. You have the answers. You have the problems, and it's up to us to do what we can to address it. We worked together, with Representative King's bill, 1699, was an issue with, for example, in Bandera County, hadn't been able to be solved, 20 years or something, and we worked together, we got it done. We listened, with his, and I had the honor of being able to carry it in the Senate, and that got signed by the governor. You know, we had the issue with in working together where the Evergreen District on importation of the water and the fee associated with that. And of course, fees are a bad word but we actually increased the fee. I hope, you know, but yeah, and yeah, I'm probably going to be up for re-election. They're going to hear that.
We didn't
Yeah.
increase it. We allowed them.
Allowed them. Yeah. See, he's not even running. Yeah, but but you know, so with, you know, the Bandera bill was that with Andy Murr, and of course the Evergreen was Chairman King. But that's where we listened to you and got things done. So as we move forward on these issues, it's going to be, and the issues in the Hill Country are different from the issues west of San Antonio, and they're different from Central Texas. They're part of my district, and of course, you know, Chairman Perry's is what, almost 1/3 of the state. You know, I'm sure, you know, it's the same there, but what is important to us is that we work together to further the funding, to further water availability, and to continue to plan to keep our Texas one of the greatest places to live on planet Earth.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to skip over you, Chairman King. I feel like perhaps you getting the last word, since it's your last summit as a legislator, is appropriate. So Chairman Perry, obviously there's implementation of Senate Bill 28. There's passage of Prop 6 that are top of mind. What else are your priorities for the interim?
Well, interim priority is going to be pretty diverse over in the committee. It looks like I've got all kinds of different issues besides groundwater. But specifically on the water initiative, I am having conversations because of 28 and 75 with new players that have a vision for water in Texas. Some of them are rehashed visions, but most of them are new visions with people that literally have resources and a commitment. So I'm hoping over the next 2 years that we can package up something of significance that will show what Texas water planning should look like and can look like with new supply elements interjected in a fashion that, you know, these are one of those deals you don't present till it's prime time and it's ready, because there'll be all the naysayers out there and there'll be all the doomsday guys that you can't do that, it's too expensive, whatever. So I think whether it shows up in the interim hearing or not, my days are already consumed. It will continue to be more consumed with having significant conversations, not only on a Texas level, but on a national level, because at the end of the day, I think that both of those initiatives can combine for not just the benefit of Texas, but all across the western side of this country, but specifically the interim on that. As far as other areas, issues in the district, I think this export conversation that has finally created some contracting issues that the courts are in process of having conversations and discussion about what that looks like. I think that we had a recent case where an overpumping from a wholesale water supply has got a district behind the 8 ball on being able to assess or at least collect fines. So we have to address the bad actors, if that's what it is, where they're not going to pay the fines assessed. But more importantly, if you violate that DFC, you're taking water from somebody else that did play by the rules. So I think that today, just in conversations with some of the revelations of late, that's probably something we're going to need to work with the water districts on. What are the teeth that are now missing to enforce fines and be able to collect them. It's the only right thing to do. But we're going to have, you know, recent disputes have indicated in settlements and mediation of those settlements in process that maybe a contract is not a contract anymore. And that's not a good place to be in the state of Texas. If you sign a contract for decades, if not since existence, contract law meant something in Texas. Because of water and the realization you can't live without it, and people that are contracting to get water supply and then trying to renege on their aspects of it. I don't want to get into the politics of all that went into all this conversation. But a contract is a contract is a contract. And now that we have things moving in a direction where maybe that's not the case, that is creating an instability in the water world that we cannot allow to the point that we shut down water supply opportunities. So those are some bigger issues. Whether they end up in an interim on a charge because of timing, I'm not sure. We've got some court cases talking about who owns the produced water. That plays straight into Senate Bill 601, as well as a $5 million pilot project to develop the private pilot projects on produced water. I'm sure that'll be part of my interim charge as those pilot charges come to fruition. But lots of things going on that, I wish we didn't have to deal with. People just do the right thing 99% of the time. We wouldn't need to meet in the legislature. But I see the interim kind of evolving as the environment we are evolving in demands and attention on the state level. Hopefully not as much as I'm afraid might be.
Thank you for that. Chairman King, reflecting back on your 28 years in the legislature and looking forward, I'd love to hear from you and give you an opportunity to share where would you like to see Texas go with respect to groundwater management and groundwater conservation districts, and what wisdom might you like to impart on our audience when it comes to groundwater management?
Well, the wisdom part is going to be a little difficult to answer, but in terms of groundwater, what I hope that the state of Texas will recognize going down the road is that it is, for the most part, is a finite resource. There are rechargeable aquifers that do a fine job of it. I live on one of them. I get my water out of one of them in the Edwards. And but most of them are basically mining operations, and you just have to, and we don't like to think about that, but that's true. And we need to recognize that human nature is such that if a policy or a program is working for a certain person and it's making money for them and it works for them, well, then it's got to be good public policy in their minds. And even though it might not be working for somebody else, if it works for me, then it's good public policy. And so you recognize that's the way human nature is, and the legislature deals with that and recognizes that's the way people are. And I have no doubt when you've got great legislators like Senator Flores and my friend here, Charles Perry, then you're going to be able to navigate that. But that is what you need to do. When I came to the legislature, and Vic Hildebrand's here, he can tell you this when he wakes up. I caught you, didn't I? I was elected for one thing, and my sole responsibility when I came to the legislature was to stop the formation of the Edwards Aquifer Authority. And I was spectacularly unsuccessful in that. And they still reelected me 13 more times. But, of course, Edwards Aquifer Authority has gone on to be a model in that particular type of district, and they've done a good job implementing what I still believe was a flawed piece of legislation. But they've managed to work around it because they've had great board members and great executive directors, and they've changed the law up some over the pieces. But you just have to recognize that sometimes things are not always what they seem, and that people have motivations for doing things, and allow them to do that. And just go ahead and try to continue to work on good public water policy for the state of Texas. So, and I do want to say that I'm grateful so much for this group, Texas Association of Groundwater Districts, and the other water groups throughout the state of Texas for allowing me to work with them. I served on this committee for 12 sessions, and then there were 2 sessions where I served on environmental reg when I wasn't on this committee. So I've been working on these types of issues the entire time that I've been here, and it's been an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the Texas Alliance of Groundwater Districts, everyone would like to thank each of you for your service this past session. Our membership did adopt resolutions in recognition for your contributions to groundwater management that I have setting over here that I'd like to share with you. But before I do that, let's recognize these legislators, and let's give Chairman King a huge send-off.